This is Season 1, Episode 9 of Twins Discuss. I'm Raquel, a research scientist.
And I'm Raven, a medical professional.
Today, the twins discuss the abduction of Angela Hammond. Listener discretion is advised. This podcast contains mentions of kidnapping and emotional distress that may not be suitable for some. This podcast was written using information from various sources. While it is presented as accurately as possible, some of what is mentioned is simply speculation. Sources can be found at our social media pages at Twins Discuss Podcast.
So yeah, we're back.
It's been a minute. Had some medical stuff go on, and we both actually, because we're twins, had some medical stuff go on at the exact same time. So
Yeah, between my shoulder, wrist, and kidney stones, and your residual concussion, migraine / heart stuff.
It's been a minute.
It's been interesting. Raquel and I actually have spent the majority of the day together, so our dialogue may be a little
Loose?
a little loose. So
Yeah. Well, and tonight is the first Ohio State football game of the season, so I deeply apologize if there is barking and my husband screaming in the background.
this means nothing to me. I don't like, as Raquel says, quote, gladiator sports.
I love football. I should be down there watching it, but you guys are more important.
Yeah, we've been trying to record this for a while. We were supposed to record last night, but I had an MRI done on my shoulder 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And I still have residual Valium in my system, so I slept for like 14 hours.
And I got a severe migraine yesterday, so it kind of worked out that we couldn't. But we're back, and we're going to get to this story, which I know nothing about. I know nothing about this case.
It's actually pretty sad. Very interesting, but very sad. There's an element of it that's sad that you'll be like, oh, it's I don't know how I would react. But yeah, so we'll get to it.
All right.
All right. So I'm going to talk about Angela in present tense since she has not been confirmed dead or alive. So throughout this whole story, I'm going to say, Angela Marie Hammond was born February 9th of 1971. Everyone called her Angie. She stands 4'11" to 5 feet tall. She's a short girl. Yeah. She weighs around 120 to 140 pounds. She has brown eyes, brown hair, has a scar on her upper lip, and wears contact lenses. She was last seen wearing a white button-down shirt with black spots on it, black slacks, and white sneakers. So all this happened in Missouri, and it happened in Clinton, Missouri. I have no idea where Clinton, Missouri is. I actually didn't look at where Clinton, Missouri is.
What kind of researcher are you?
I know, I'm terrible. I just thought about that. I didn't look where Clinton was. But yeah, so she disappeared in Clinton. She was a popular girl who was going to Central Missouri State University. And on January of 1991, Angela became engaged to her fiancé, Rob Schaefer. Rob had planned to join the military, and they appear to be a happy couple. There isn't really a whole lot out there on Angie or her disappearance, so I actually had to find my resources. I think there's a Wikipedia page where I read some on her, but actually there's an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh, Lord.
And I watched, it had like a little, like it was one of the 3 stories in the episode. It was like a 19-minute segment that I watched.
Oh, wow. And it's probably inaccurate as heck if it's Unsolved Mysteries. Old Unsolved Mysteries, not new Unsolved Mysteries.
It was old Unsolved Mysteries. So I watched that, and then I pieced together from the Wikipedia, from resources online, from the Charlie Project, and things like that about her story. And it's actually pretty consistent. On the night of April 4th of 91 in Clinton, Missouri, Angela was to meet her fiance, Rob, after he dropped her off at home around 9 or 10 p.m. They had been at a barbecue, and he had drove her home and dropped her off at her house because he had to go watch his little brother, I believe it was. He had to go watch his little brother And then he had plans to meet her later. So remember, it's 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah, but you're young, you know. I mean, when you were young, it wasn't nothing for somebody to say, let's meet at 11:30.
Yeah, you know, and she, so around 11:15, Angela called Rob from a payphone in a parking lot outside of a store called the Food Barn Store, 7 blocks away from Rob's house. She told him she was too tired to meet up. She wanted to go home and take a bath. While
Legit.
he was talking to her, I should probably state that Angela was 4 months pregnant.
Oh,
Yeah, she was 4 months pregnant at the time, engaged, and she was in a parking lot on a payphone talking to her fiance, saying she was too tired, she wanted to go home and take a bath. And while she was on the phone with him, she said a suspicious man was circling the parking lot in an old truck.
no.
No, she's like on the phone telling her fiance, hey, there's this truck that's circling the parking lot and he's not going away. She described it to Rob, stating that the person was driving an old model green Ford F-150 with a decal covering the back window, possibly of water or some outdoor scene. Now imagine, you're at a payphone, there's this creepy dude circling around you, and you actually have the mindset to describe this person in this vehicle to your fiance or whomever on the other end of the phone. She must have had some bad vibes.
I would probably, I mean, most girls probably would think something similar. Like, you get the hair on the back of your neck stands up, your sixth or seventh sense, you know, will tingle, and you'll go, this isn't right. I mean, honestly, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably similar to what we are, and you overthink every situation. She
Everything.
could have, yeah, I mean, she could have been one of those true crime junkies that, you know, think about those sorts of situations and puts herself in it and goes, okay, this is kind of hairy. I'm just going to mention it to somebody in case something happens. Which in her case, I'm assuming in case something happened did.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, she was engaged, she was going to get married, she was pregnant, she was in a happy relationship, and she just happened to stop at the Food Barn Store, which don't exist anymore. They were
yeah.
absorbed in Missouri, because I actually was like, is it the Food Barn Store? Is it Food Barn Store? Hey, you know.
You're overthinking it.
I am, and it's apparently Food Barn Store, not the Food Barn Store.
Gotcha.
But anyway, so she described, backing up a little bit. So the man parked his car near the booth and got out.
And she's still on the phone.
Yeah, she's on the phone with him still, on the phone with Rob. So the man parked near the booth, got out, got to the payphone next to her, and started talking on the phone. She wasn't listening to what he was saying. According to Rob, she described the man as a dirty, filthy bearded man, wearing coveralls, eyeglasses, a dark-colored baseball cap, and had a mustache. She stated he then left the phone, went back to his truck, and appeared to be looking for something with a flashlight. Shortly thereafter, Schaefer heard her scream, and he immediately yelled her name into the phone a few times before dropping the phone, not even hanging it up, and rushing out the house to his car.
Oh, no.
He said the last thing he heard on the phone was the man saying, I didn't need to use the phone anyway.
Creepy.
Very creepy. So, 7 blocks away, he raced to Angela's last known location, but on the way there, he passed a truck going in the opposite direction. He heard Angela scream his name while he saw her struggling in the truck with the unknown man. He immediately slammed on the brakes, put his car in reverse, turned, and began chasing after him. Can you fathom?
I'm on the edge of my seat right now because I wouldn't stop until I ran the dude off the road and everybody died. I'm sorry.
Oh, man.
Like, I was going to have closure.
He was involved in this. And when I was watching the Unsolved Mysteries episode, he was on there talking, and he was so young, and he was so... There's just, like, he wasn't even upset. There was this look in his eyes like, you know, if I hadn't have done this, it would be this way. If I hadn't have done this, it would be this way. Like, these little paths, these little things that diverged, you know, that if he hadn't have walked this way, it would have happened this way. Well, the reason being was because he made it about a mile before his transmission failed.
No!
Yep. So he didn't know that when he saw her and he slammed on brakes, he threw his car into reverse. And when he did, he hadn't fully stopped, and it completely ruined the transmission.
Oh my God. So he lost his only opportunity to stop what was happening and maybe save her.
Yep. And so he severely damaged the transmission. He got out of his car. And there's nothing he could have done. He ran to the nearest phone to call the police, but at that point, she was gone. So
Damn.
I can't even fathom what it would be like if it were you. You know, I mean, oh my God, what would you do? I mean,
yeah, well, I'm 5'9.5" and well over 200 pounds. So if some dude is trying to take me in his truck, I'm gonna probably break many bones in his body. He better be a linebacker.
yeah. I mean,
But she's not. She's petite, and those people are targets because they're smaller and they're easier to get.
Yep, she is petite, and she was pregnant at the time. I mean, and it's easy for us to overpower people because we are taller, we are bigger, and we know to wreck that damn truck before we get far away. I mean, you can get to the eyeballs, the crotch, the steering wheel. You know, you can do a lot of things to wreck that car, even if it might hurt you. You won't get very far.
Yeah, no, I'd rather die trying than get taken, from point A to point B alive. This is a great instance of that. I mean, if the dude is bigger than her, like well bigger than her, he could have picked her up and moved her, and it really wouldn't have mattered how much she tried to fight. But you kind of have to keep your calm about you. But since so few people expect those things to actually happen, like she was probably telling her boyfriend, oh, there's this, sleazy dude, like da 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 da, just in case, but she didn't think that he would actually come and take her.
Yeah. But she had enough sense about her to describe him to her fiance. I mean, this girl's in her early 20s. I mean, she's very popular. I mean, who probably done something she normally has done a dozen times. Dozen times.
Yeah, but it's totally against everything you should do. You should not be out by yourself at night in a secluded location, regardless of if you're on the phone with somebody. I mean, that sets you up to be a target. Like, always travel in well-lit places in groups, or in crowded places. But it's also easy to disappear in crowded places. I'm totally overthinking this right now, but...
Yeah, I mean, this is 1991. She was in her early 20s, and, this is something, like I said, she's probably done 100 times before, and this is just one instance. And it actually gets pretty interesting as to the theories later on as to why they think this happened. So her car was eventually found abandoned in that parking lot. Her fiance was considered a suspect.
Of course he was.
One's closest, last person
Why
seeing
waste
her.
your time? Yeah.
Yeah.
Why waste your time looking for her when you could blame the fiance? Did they put a bolo out for that truck immediately?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Yep. So he passed the polygraph test and then was not considered a suspect. In the episode of Unsolved Mysteries, when he was talking about it, he was like, I understand why they did it. I get why they thought I was a suspect.
Well, that's what they do.
Yep. He was like, I get it. It wasted time, but I get it. He was very understanding about it, but I have no doubt in my mind that he had nothing to do with her disappearance. So
He broke his car trying to chase her.
Yeah.
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 And my second thought, though, is she was only 7 blocks away from him. Why bother calling him on a phone?
Yeah, there's little elements about that, like, why didn't she just roll over there and be like, I'm too tired to see you, I mean, what...
That's what I would have done.
Yeah, was she already on the way home and was like, he's in the opposite direction to her? I mean...
Did she go shopping at the food barn? I didn't...
I think it was closed by the time because he dropped her off at 10. She got in her car and said, that's the other thing.
Right.
He dropped her off at 10. He drove home 7 blocks away. She got in her car, drove 7 blocks, or drove to wherever at the food barn 7 blocks away from him, called him, and was abducted.
Right, that's why I'm kind of thinking, why? I mean, she may not have had a phone at her place, but in the 90s, most people had a phone at their place.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't she just call him from her place and tell him that she was going to take a bath and she was tired and she was going to spend the rest of the night inside versus going to she might have been like, oh, I'm going to go to the food barn and grab whatever, but she probably would have known. I know when things are closed around me.
She might have been going to pick him up and then decided, she wasn't feeling well, whatever. She's going to go home.
But 7 blocks, that's nothing. Go drive down there and be like, hey, boo.
I mean, I know with my boyfriend, I would have just went to his house and be like, hey, babe, look, I'm tired. I want to go take a bath. I'm going to go on home. And I will see you tomorrow or whatever. But for whatever reason, she stopped and got on the phone.
Fate, man. It's a living nightmare. Okay, so what happened after he was cleared with the polygraph and they sent the bolo out for the truck? And
so field and air searches yielded nothing. They didn't find a single thing except her car. The police found 1,600 matches to the vehicle description.
In Missouri?
In Missouri.
God.
I mean,
what about the dude?
An old model green Ford F-150, and the dude. I
bet everybody there has a beard and wore overalls and drove an old green truck.
And the thing is, it had this decal on the back that was unique to that vehicle. But apparently when they started looking, according to the police, they had so many other trucks with that type of decal on it. I guess that was the popular thing back then. I don't know. And so the case, they didn't find anything from anybody. It's like there's so much to this case that there were so many elements for her to be found.
I've got so many problems right now with this.
Yeah, I mean, and there's not a lot out there on this case. There's so many things about this case where they could have found her. I mean, she gave a description of the vehicle. There was somebody who heard her. They had a timeline. I mean, they had a timeline of when she went missing, where she was last at. I mean, who she last spoke to. They had a description of the vehicle, of the man, of everything.
Well, and hunters typically go to areas they know. So this guy had been there before in that town. Mm-hmm. Like, he was going to come back at some point. And you're telling me that nobody found anything? Did they ever find anything between then and now? No. Or are we right where we started? So you're telling me since 1991, nobody has come forward with anything? This truck, this person, there were there were 2 cases that was linked to her. There were similar cases in 100-mile radius. There was one in Nevada, Missouri, of a woman named Cheryl Ann Kinney on February 27th of 91. Now remember, Angela was in April. Right.
So this one was in February. And Cheryl Ann Kinney was leaving work at a convenience store around 10 p.m. and disappeared. She was never found. Her case remains unsolved.
Sounds similar.
Then there was one in Max Creek, Missouri, of a woman named Tracy Darby on January 19th of 91. Darby's store was robbed of $220. Then her nude body was found in, now I don't know how to pronounce this river's name, Little Niangua River? Little Niangia? Sorry, people in Missouri. I can't remember how Google told me how to say that. So her body was found in this river 2 days later. She was shot in the head with a shotgun twice.
Twice?
Yeah.
That's
this was a
overkill.
very personal crime.
I was about to say, this one doesn't sound the same as the others. But we
Yeah.
don't have bodies for the others, do we?
No. Well, and her body...
But if they found the body, did that person put it where it could be found, right?
Yeah, and that's why I don't think this case links up very well, because her half-brother was eventually convicted of her rape and murder in 2017. So they linked this case back in the 90s, and then in 2017, her half-brother was found to have committed her rape and murder.
Then I don't think
I don't think that case is related. My gut instinct tells me that one's not related. Maybe Cheryl Ann Kinney?
Yeah, 'cause
maybe.
Nighttime, convenience store, never found. But those are the only links.
Yeah.
Because that's all they have. Were they similar body stature? Did they look the same? Did they have similar schedules? Or is it just, you don't know because they don't tell you anything?
I mean, I don't even know what. I think Angela didn't have a job. I think she was just a student. But the only links that are similar is they were all leaving stores.
Right.
You know, like Cheryl Ann was leaving a convenience store. And Mac was leaving, or Darby was leaving another store. Angela was outside of a store.
They could have just been crimes of convenience.
They could have been. But, so, nothing. There's nothing out there on her.
My God.
And so for well over, 20 years. Is that right?
Almost
2000.
30 years, Raven.
Yeah, 30 years. So for 30 years, nobody knows anything. But on April 14th of 2021, new evidence was reported.
What?
Yep. A detective working on the cold case believes Hammond's abduction was a case of mistaken identity.
Ooh, my worst nightmare.
He stated another girl named Angela was the daughter of a confidential police informant. Similar build, similar stature, exact same name, everything. So the case that the informant was working on them with was a significant narcotics case with several businesses involved that would have been disrupted by this informant. So a piece of evidence from early in the case was found after revisiting the file, which was a letter made of cut-out magazine letters.
Oh, of course.
I don't know what that letter said. I couldn't find it because this is such new evidence. I doubt they're going to release that anytime soon.
They probably kept that to themselves because if they ever found the person and they had sent it, it would be like, what did it say? Because only you would know and we would know. So unless somebody leaked it out.
Yep. So
have they DNA tested all of? Well, you probably don't know. DNA tested all of this.
I have no idea. My assumption would be yes, but you know how long DNA evidence takes to go
Well,
through.
then once they get it, they can, with genealogy records now, they may be able to link it to something for someone.
Yep.
I know that there's a bunch of cases that I'm researching right now, and genealogy is becoming one of those hot and heavily contested privacy issues. But also, I mean, you've got these. You look at Gary Ridgway. If we wouldn't have ever gotten him if it hadn't been for genealogy.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, Peterbilt paint flecks.
Yeah.
On his clothes, they found all the victims, and they went to his locker, and they found his DNA and paint flecks, on his uniform that matched the victims and where he was at. And Green River Running Red, y'all, by Ann Rule. Great book. It's about Gary Ridgway.
We're segueing. We're totally segueing. So, damn. So has her family, been spearheading anything, or have they just given her to God and let it go? Or nobody really lets it go, but some people just don't fight because
no idea.
They know.
I couldn't find anything on what Schaefer had been doing, what her family has been doing. There's hardly anything out there on her. And, there was a voicemail that was left a few months prior to 2021 explaining the letter, but no further information has been provided on that. So I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I have no idea. And I'm sure they're keeping some of this stuff pretty close to their chest until
They should.
Yeah, because this was April, of this year.
Wow. Well, we've both seen cases get solved decades and decades later. Not anything, 100 years ago, but, now we're seeing stuff from the 60s and 70s get solved, and that's great. But also, we know she's dead.
There's a good possibility that, there have been several sightings of her throughout the years, but obviously nothing that's been confirmed.
Right. I was watching, I'm a huge fan of shows like Disappeared. Mm-hmm. And I was watching the Molly Bish episode.
Yeah.
And she, she disappeared in 2001, and there were multiple sightings of, quote, her in all around in Florida and different parts of the United States. But her body was found in 2003 in a wooded area not too far away from where she disappeared. I mean, people see things all the time because everybody looks similar when you don't know them, and then they turn up, dead close to where they were, and it what's the other one? The Tara Calico case. People have been saying that now she's never been found.
Oh,
they've been saying they've
yeah.
been
She
seeing
was
her.
the one that they had the last pictures of her, possibly of her.
The
bound
Polaroid.
with duct tape. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and she was with that little boy. Oh, I cannot remember his name right now off the top of my head. But they thought that it was one little boy. Oh, man, what was his name? I can't leave this unsaid. Let me Google it real fast while we're on this podcast. But, and they thought it was one little boy, and then it ended up that he was found not too far away from where he disappeared, and he died of exposure.
Yeah, I mean,
But,
and Angela from a distance would look like a lot of people.
Yes.
I mean, and y'all should definitely look at her picture, since she still is a missing person. She has not been declared dead. I mean, the probability of her still being alive is pretty low, especially if she's connected to those other cases.
Yeah, and she would have had to have given, if she had remained pregnant, she would have had to have given birth. And, did anybody, Michael Henley was that little boy that, was not in the Polaroid with Tara Calca. But, if she get given birth, if she was being held captive, like Elizabeth Smart, if she'd have given birth in the hospital or at home, I mean, there's so many things to follow through on to potentially track her.
This case had every element for them to find her. And it's like, where did it go wrong? Did it go wrong?
It only takes one small thing, though, for somebody to get away.
Yep, and he was going, I mean, think about it. Put it all together. She was on the phone, described the vehicle, they knew her location, knew the time frame. Guy heard, her fiance heard the guy's voice. They knew the description of the truck, of him. He actually chased after them, knew the direction they were going in, called the police immediately. And
it was witnessed, basically.
Everything about it was pretty much witnessed. I mean, and they had, there's so little on this case about, did they mess up on the chain of evidence? What?
What do you think?
What do I think? I think that they followed the wrong lead for too long. And by that time, it was too late. They might have thought that he was lying. That Schaefer was lying. And they followed that for too long. And it became too late. And she is either in human trafficking or she's dead. And
or she was in human trafficking and now she's dead.
Yeah. Her personality, from what I have read, was a very strong personality.
Then odds are she didn't make it more than 48 hours.
Yeah, that would be my assumption.
Or she killed herself.
It would be, hopefully, there will be some closure to this case because, it has been open for so long. It's one of Missouri's most famous disappearances. It's known as the payphone abduction.
Where did it happen again? What part of
Clinton, Missouri? So, while she's looking up that, if anyone has seen Angela or knows anything about the case, contact the Clinton Police Department at 660-885-5561.
Clinton's in the middle of nowhere, Raven.
I know. It's like the Below murders, man.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It looks like it's about 30 miles southeast of Kansas City, right on. There's a Walmart there. There's Walmart everywhere, ain't there?
Yeah.
What is this river structure? It's right off a large tributary, so
I mean, it's like
that's
what
another
what
thing.
could she have done different to not let that happen? I mean,
When it's
she was
your
already
time,
do what?
when it's your time,
Yeah, I mean, she was already in that situation. She screamed, she hollered, she kicked, she fought. I mean, could she have left sooner and not have gotten abducted? Got in her car as soon as she saw him circling? Would he have followed her?
he would have followed her.
What would I have done personally was I'd have gotten back in my car when I felt someone was following me. I wouldn't have stayed on the phone with anybody, and I would have drove my ass around my elbow to my butt or my butt to my elbow or whichever way to make sure they didn't know where I was at or where I was going.
Yeah.
And I would probably have drove right to the fucking police station. And
Yep.
that's where I would have gotten out and I would have stayed until, be like, look, this dude's following me. I'm uncomfortable with it. And I would have stayed there and waited until somebody came and picked me up or followed me home. I mean, there's no problem in being too paranoid when you're
Yeah.
out by yourself.
Yeah.
And that leads us to, you want me to do the Pearl of Wisdom?
Yeah, you can. I think that because I was looking up, Clinton to see like what the area looked like, and it looks like they've recently released that note you're talking about.
No kidding.
Yeah, it says. Let me get the full thing up. So it looks like they only released part of it, but it says hello, and it's like it's in those blocky letters from magazines that says hello, and then the word N-O, and it says, we know who you are, no, N-O again. People like you deserve what you get. We know where your foxy daughter is at. She will see us soon. Tell, and then they redacted this, she has our deepest sympathy. Further loss. And that's it.
Well, no wonder they thought that it was a mistaken identity thing.
This letter was mailed the same day that Angela disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah. So it looks like they redacted some of it and then didn't show the full thing, but
Well, it sounds like it definitely could be a case of missing identity or mistaken identity.
yeah. Well, if she's still alive, her identity is missing, so. But I hope that she's not.
She would have had a hell of a 30 years.
Yeah, that's a hell of a life to go through. But if she is, I mean, Stockholm Syndrome is a thing too, Maybe she doesn't even remember who she is or where she's from. I think that it's harder on the families to hold on to false hope like that. I mean, I would almost... You don't watch the show Manifest,
No.
but I do. And I would rather have kind of let you go as being dead than to hold on for years and years that you're alive, and then my life kind of gets wasted in that waiting. Whereas if I just let you go, and if you show up again, it's one of those, oh my God, I didn't give up on you, but you wouldn't want, I wouldn't want you to wait around. I would want you to continue trying to figure out what happened, but not sit there and wait for me to show up. The woman on the episode of Disappeared, Molly Bish's mom, she said, you're constantly, before you know what happens, you're stuck in this place between hell and hope. And that is not a good place to be.
That's pretty terrible.
Yeah, it is. And I'm sure that Angela Hammond's family was living in an absolute nightmare.
And I'm sure Schaefer had a hard time, going through, does he let her go and move on? I mean, this was his fiancée carrying his baby,
How much of it's his fault?
Yep. How much is
the survivor's guilt.
Oh, to be certain. This is...
Oh, that poor guy.
I know, and that's why I'm like, I don't know what I would do with myself. I mean, do I spearhead... because the way it looked, he tried so hard to get the police to listen to him. He had to go through the polygraph test. Meanwhile, the police probably aren't listening, to that letter and whatnot because they don't know that it's her because they're pointing it at Schaefer.
Yeah, but how much of his life? I mean, I'm sure he gave as much of it as he could before it becomes you can't both die.
Oh yeah, no, and I am sure that he did everything. Like just watching the Unsolved Mysteries and him talk. I mean, he seems so incredibly sincere.
Yeah, he has my deepest sympathy because this sounds.
It sounds horrible. Like it brings tears to my eyes. Think, oh my God, that's absolutely horrific.
Nobody imagines them being put in that position, and then, but. Yeah, if anybody has any information, you have a lot of friends in Missouri. Maybe they've not even heard of this. Maybe they know something.
Yeah, I'll have to ask. One of my best friends lives in Missouri.
Yeah. All right, what's our pearl?
So tonight's pearl of wisdom is follow your gut instinct. So
that's never wrong.
Yeah, this is something that I preach to my trainees constantly and my students. I'm like, look, when you take tests, even. If your gut tells you that's the right answer, if it's the first thing that pops in your head, that's probably the right answer because some part of your brain knows something that you don't outright know.
Well, and you'll overthink it. You'll think yourself out of the right answer. I am a god-awful test taker. And if I listen to my first instinct, it's typically right. My husband's an amazing test taker because that's what he does. But I overthink it. I'm like, no, because I want to pick the easiest answer. And it's often that trickiest one. But when it comes to anything else in my life, my gut has never, ever been wrong as much as I've wanted it to be.
Yeah. No, and I was a good example of this. I was taking my test yesterday for CPR. Now, y'all, I'm a instructor, and I know CPR. I have done a lot of CPR. And I'm saying hundreds of times have I done CPR. Probably more than that. And I took this test. It's 25 questions. AHA, CPR, BTW, BLS provider. Go get it. And I was taking it, and these 3 questions I didn't even answer until I got to the very end. I had to go back to them because I was like questioning myself. So my gut instinct was the right ones. I eventually got them right, but I debated and debated and debated, even though my gut instinct was the first one that my brain went, that's right.
I always, when that happens, because you take tests like I do, and this is what you're supposed to do. If you don't know the answer, skip it and come back, because a lot of the times there's another question in there that has the answer to what you're looking for. But my gut instinct will tell me something, and I'll kind of put like a little dot beside that is like that's the answer that your gut told you first. And if I, riddle me this enough, I'll just choose that one. And unless it's a physics test, and to hell with that because I'm gonna fail it.
Yeah, the way we take tests now is everything's online. So Scantron does everything online now, so you can't go back. You have to
screw that.
You have to, and so everything you and I learned in school to do tests, everything is online now, which is why when when any test I have to take in the future for EMT, med school, whatever, everything is automated. It's all online now.
See, I didn't graduate that long ago, okay? And we were still doing things on paper. But this was pre-COVID, too. I graduated in December of 2019.
Well, the state had moved, our state has moved to online everything for the type of courses that I test in. So, or I give tests to. So you have to answer that question and then move on. You can't go back and reference.
Well, this has nothing to do with our Pearl of Wisdom or Angela Hammond, except listen to your gut.
Listen to your gut. So a lot of people get in trouble by not listening to their instincts. And if something seems hinky,
it's hinky.
Probably is hinky.
Yep. Always look out for your own safety.
Yep.
Well, so thank you for that very depressing and sad story, Raven.
There's hardly anything out there. It's just like the Below murders.
There's so many women that this will go off on a tangent, and I'm not going to let it, but so many women that have disappeared that there's nothing on. Nothing. And especially there are women of the world majority that have disappeared that there's nothing on. Less than this, even.
They get
you know?
lost in the ether.
Yep, and they still count.
Yeah. I mean, people existed. They still exist. They're out there somewhere.
Somebody loves them.
Somebody loves them. It's just like addiction. Somebody loves them, and they're not lost.
Yep.
But it's sad. It's
Yeah.
That was a very sad case. It is a very
Yep.
sad case.
Well, if anybody wants to look at, there's this case that the Charlie Project talks about, and I'm sure that there is also, you can go on the Doe Network and look at other people that should have names that don't. Maybe you know a name.
You never know. I mean, somebody out there knows something. They always do.
All right.
That's the case.
Terrible.
Yeah.
Today's episode was written by Raven Hutto. Sound editing and mixing by Raven Hutto. Our theme song was composed by Steve Brendley. Today's sources can be found on our Facebook or Instagram at Twins Discuss Podcast and Twitter at Twins Discuss. The Twins will be back next time with an all-new episode.